The rain was coming down in fine silver needles that night, turning the streets of Manhattan into rivers of glittering reflections. In a quiet corner of the city, inside the grand hall of the Astoria Hotel, a private charity gala was in full swing. Diamonds sparkled, champagne glasses clinked, and laughter floated like smoke. But on the far end of the marble lobby, behind the crowd and almost invisible, a man in a worn suit stood still, holding his little girl's hand. Ethan Carter didn't belong here. At least, not anymore. Once, he'd been a promising pianist at Juilliard. But life had its way of reshuffling dreams, his wife's illness, medical bills, and finally, the night she was gone. Since then, Ethan worked double shifts at a warehouse, every spare dollar going to keep his daughter, Lily, fed and safe. They weren't here for the gala. They were waiting for the bus. The hotel lobby had just been shelter from the rain. But then it happened. A tall woman in a glittering silver gown. Vivian Rothschild, heiress to the Rothschild estate, noticed him staring at the grand piano displayed like a jewel in the middle of the room. It was her family's heirloom, over a century old, said to have been played by Chopin himself. She smirked. "What's the matter? Never seen a real piano before?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I've seen one," he said quietly. Her friends gathered, curiosity turning to mockery. "Tell you what," Vivian said, her voice dripping with playful cruelty. "Play Chopin on my heirloom. If you can actually make it sound like music, every penny in my clutch is yours." She laughed, expecting him to refuse. But Ethan looked down at Lily, her shoes damp from the rain, her little coat too thin for the season. Then he looked back at Vivian. "I'll play." The crowd leaned in. Ethan sat at the bench, fingers hovering over ivory keys yellowed with time. The first touch was like greeting an old friend. And then, the music came. It wasn't just notes. It was pain, hope, grief, and love woven into every phrase. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filled the marble hall, warm and trembling, a river of sound carrying every soul in the room to another place. Conversations stopped. Glasses were set down. Even the waiters froze mid-step. When the last note faded, there was no applause, just silence. The kind that hangs heavy when hearts are too full for words. Vivian blinked fast, as if waking from a dream. She opened her clutch and spilled the money onto the piano. But then she did something no one expected. She took off her diamond bracelet and placed it beside the cash. Where did you learn to play like that?" she asked, voice shaking. Ethan simply said, "I used to dream." Vivian didn't smile this time. Instead, she walked away, returning moments later with a man in a dark suit, the director of the New York Philharmonic. "This man belongs on a stage," she said softly. 2 months later, Ethan wasn't working double shifts anymore. He was rehearsing under the warm lights of a concert hall, Lily sitting in the front row with a brand new coat, her little feet swinging. He played Chopin that night, too, but this time, he wasn't just playing to survive. He was playing to live. The city's winter melted into spring, and Ethan's name began appearing on posters outside music halls, alongside words he'd never imagined seeing again: soloist, featured pianist, Chopin master. But what stayed the same was the way he walked Lily to school each morning, holding her small hand like it was the most valuable thing in the world. They still stopped by the little bakery on the corner, where she picked her favorite chocolate croissant. Only now, instead of counting quarters in his pocket, he slipped a bill on the counter without thinking twice. One evening, after a rehearsal, he returned to find a letter waiting backstage. No sender's name, just his. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "For the night you reminded me that beauty still exists in this world. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about a lot of things. Keep playing, people need to hear it." Taped to the letter was an old, faded photo. It was of a young man, Vivian's father, sitting at that very same heirloom piano, his head bent in concentration. Ethan realized then why she'd laughed that night, why she'd made it a game. The piano wasn't just an heirloom, it was her last tangible piece of someone she'd lost. And hearing him play had cracked open something she'd locked away for years. Months later, after a sold-out concert, Ethan spotted Vivian near the exit. She wasn't in diamonds this time, just a simple navy coat, her hair loose. They didn't speak for long. "You kept your promise," she said. "I didn't promise you anything," Ethan replied. "You did," she smiled faintly. "You promised to make the world stop for a moment. And you did." As she walked away into the spring night, Ethan thought about how strange life could be. A cruel dare in a hotel lobby had turned into a second chance, not just for him, but for her. And as the city hummed around him, he realized something else. Dreams don't really die. Sometimes, they just wait, quietly, until someone plays the first note. Summer arrived, and with it came Ethan's first international invitation, a performance in London. Lily's excitement was impossible to contain. She told anyone who would listen that her dad was famous in another country now. Before they boarded the plane, Ethan found himself back at the Astoria Hotel. The same marble lobby, the same gleaming piano in the center. He ran his fingers over the keys, not to perform, but to remember. A voice behind him said, "Careful, that thing's priceless." He turned, half smiling. "So I've heard." Vivian stood there, holding a small wooden box. She handed it to him without ceremony. Inside, wrapped in velvet, was a fountain pen, gold-trimmed, the initials, J.R., engraved on its side. "It was my father's," she said quietly. "He signed every music contract with it. I think it's time someone else used it." Ethan's throat tightened. "Vivian, I can't." "Yes, you can. And you will." On stage in London a week later, Ethan introduced his final piece of the night, Chopin's Nocturne. But before he played, he told the audience a story, not about wealth or fame, but about how a single act, even one meant as a joke, could change two lives forever. When the applause finally ended, he stepped into the wings where Lily waited with a smile that lit up the dim backstage hallway. He knelt, scooping her into his arms. "We did it, Dad," she whispered. "No," he said, holding her close, "we're just getting started." And somewhere in the front row, Vivian sat very still, hands folded in her lap, the sound of Chopin wrapping around her like a memory she never wanted to end. This time, her eyes weren't filled with loss, they were shining with something far rarer.